Hi everybody, I'm Lennert, this is Rauf. We're building Airweave. Airweave is an open source dev tool that you can use to essentially turn any third-party application, or any source for that matter, databases or APIs are fine too, into long-term memory for your AI agent or AI application. We do that by making these contents searchable for agents. And so this started as something that we were building for our own agent company to solve this data retrievability issue that we were facing. And we were kind of frustrated with the tooling or lack thereof and started building this as an internal solution, and that birthed Airweave. One of the major challenges that we faced and are facing, of course, is how do you maximize integration coverage in a scalable way. And to walk you through, like in a hands-on way, how we dealt with that, we're gonna, Rauf is gonna build an integration live, and we're gonna pause and talk about some of which challenges led to certain decisions into how we're building that right now, and then we're gonna show after that a more complicated one. Similarly. So if you have questions, feel free to ask anything in between, and or do you want to pause on the architecture?
No, I think we can revisit this later.
Yeah, cool. So any Studio Ghibli fans over here? Yeah, at least one, okay. So what we're going to be doing right now is, like I said, a very simple source connector. So just to reiterate for your own understanding, Airweave transports data from sources, usually third-party applications, to destinations. You could say vector databases, graph databases, and usually combinations thereof. So right now we're going to be building a relatively simple source connector for this open REST API that you can find for the Studio Ghibli movies. Why it's a little bit simpler is because you don't have to authenticate anything. You don't have to authenticate the connection, so it's a bit more straightforward. So the way you would build it is we have these decorators that you can decorate the source class with.
Sorry? You zoom in a bit.
More?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Is it readable now?
No.
You wanted to zoom in? You want us to zoom in a bit more? You can't see it.
There is one letter.
Yeah, exactly. So what you would decorate it with is just the way you want to name this, like the full name and the short name. That's what you see in the source decorator that Rauf just imported. The create method is the constructor that we would use. So this is fairly simple. Again, it's just returning the class itself. If we would be building an authenticated connector, then this is where you would be doing all the token handling, or all of it. That's something that comes with Airweave out of the box, but that's where you would pass it through. To speed things up a little bit, we're going to be using Cursor to get the schema, get the module out quicker. This is of course going to be based on previous modules that we built, but we didn't want to take up too much time in the demo. So what you're seeing right now, what Rauf is writing is, so this connector is split up into two major components. First of all, the entity schemas, that's where we wrap the API object models that we deem important for this connector into our custom Pydantic schemas. And then there's the source connector, and this is the actual class that'll traverse the API structure and then generate these entity chunks. And in this case, the entity generation is a fairly simple process. It just pulls all the objects and then generates these chunks. Let's say you'd be using a more, let's say, nested application like Asana. What it would do, it would walk through every project, every workspace, then every project, every board, every list, every ticket, and then not only store the actual information, so let's say the text in the ticket, but also the entity relationship between all the objects that you follow to get to that specific piece of information. Exactly.
Yeah.
And want to add anything to that?
No. Yeah. So just as an extra explanation, so what we've done now is we've wrapped this base entity. These are sort of the minimalist chunks like Lennert mentioned before. And just very simply, we are generating these entities. And from this point on, the whole framework takes this over and writes this to the vector database, right?
Yeah.
Now that I've done this, what you will see, it's very hard to move around. One thing that's not immediately clear, but one thing that we implemented internally is sort of an introspection module that helps us use these decorators as sort of markings in our code base to actually come and pull out these sources that we created. So what happened now is a sync happened, the script ran that introspectively analyzed all of these decorators. And if we go to our application now, we promised Tomás not to show too much of the application and stick on code, but it's just going to be a small screen. I already sneaked in this little Studio Ghibli icon here. And you can see that this card was created because we actually created that bit of code that points to this implementation. If we choose this source.
Yeah, and just to emphasize, so if you can use Airweave using our Python or TypeScript SDKs, or just use the API directly, or via this web UI. And if you'd be using our, yeah?
You mentioned SDK, but it seems more like kind of duck. Like you need to class certain decorators, and nothing is preventing you from building it without the SDK.
Excuse me?
So, like, you're basically saying that your class needs to have these kind of methods and these decorators.
Yeah.
But I don't need to need for the SDK.
Well, there's kind of a few facets to this. So one, you actually need the decorator. So the decorator comes from our internal model, right?
Yeah.
So this is kind of how we try to do this open source enablement of exposing these types. We're still working on the developer interface for this part. And then what you see now is the user interface, but all of the stuff that is going on here, that you can actually talk to with the SDK or the REST APIs as well. I'll show that in a little bit.
Yeah, so all the synchronization logic, all of that is what you would be accessing or triggering using the SDK.
You put something in the chat that generates that you're identical, right?
Yeah.
Is that an open API spec or what was going on?
Yeah, so I kind of raw dogged it, where I just put in the whole JSON. I think there's like 21 Studio Ghibli movies. So it's a pretty large JSON, but it has an end.
Right, I was thinking like if this is an open API spec, you can like generate almost everything.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. So one of the ways we actually see Airweave getting to a large coverage, sorry Thomas, this is a bit of a business lingo, but the way we think we can actually get to large coverage count of these integrations is actually by using development agents to put in, for example, open API specifications. Along with extra prompting and access
And
to
the documentation, exactly.
to generate these classes at a very high speed to effectively write this boilerplate for us. Right?
Yeah, with testing.
Yeah, so basically the process that you just did, it would be automated at a very high scale.
Yeah,
That's what we are trying to.
that's what we're working on right now.
Yeah, so we wanted to show you like a very elementary example of what's actually going on. We expect that as an open source project, we'll be able to cover the most important APIs, and then also be extensible through maybe some cursor rules for people to onboard their own APIs into the platform as well.
So yeah, what you saw just now is, or what happened in the background is this synchronization process. So then what happens is all these specific entities get pulled and get transported to, in this case, the native Weaviate instance that we're hosting. You could also use your own VectorDB or GraphDB of choice. And then we track, we hash the specific chunks of information for tracking updates and inserts and whatnot. And a cool thing you can do in the UI is like a sanity check, whether the data is, whether the synchronization, the mapping made sense. We have a small chat UI that you can ask questions like these and kind of chat with the data you just synchronized. So, like we said, that was a pretty simple case, like a very clear-cut API model structure. But what do you do when the objects don't have a fixed structure? For instance, if you're trying to connect a SQL database, you don't know beforehand which types of fields you're going to have. So to deal with that, we came up with using this polymorphic entity generation, where in a metaprogramming-ish way, we pull the specific, in this case, the specific tables, and then generate the attributes based on the fields that we see in that SQL table.
Yeah, so this is kind of the way we see this types of frameworks going forward. If we really want this platform to be plug and play, we actually need to do the sort of runtime inference of what's actually the data type that we're dealing with. So Postgres obviously has this nature because it's tables and you don't know what the table might have. Salesforce, ServiceNow,
Monday,
SAP, Monday, Notion, those types of CRUD apps or whatever you may call them, you don't know beforehand what it might look like, but still you want to have a capacity of moving all of that information in a semi-structured way into the long-term memory of your agent. So this is one of the things we think that Airweave could make a difference for agent developers going forward.
yeah.
Maybe we can show a bit about
I actually don't understand that. Like, how does it work with these unstructured tables, like the SQL database?
So SQL databases are by definition structured, right? So it's tabular data.
Yeah.
They have named columns.
I think I used the incorrect word, not unstructured, but you don't know the structure beforehand. That was the
Yeah. You don't know
exactly.
which attributes you're going to have beforehand, exactly.
Yeah. So how does it navigate them if it doesn't know?
So it at runtime it queries the entity relations of these tables, right? So it's a bunch of SQL tables. They point at each other. Similar structure you might find in Salesforce, where the custom CRM has different entities that point at each other in a certain way, all custom per environment. And what it does is it actually looks at that, and then based on that generates these schemas on the fly. So just like we defined this Ghibli film, which obviously was a very dumbed down, easy example, you can actually do this on the fly as well for these tables, and then also keep those relations going forward so that your agent can function on it.
Yeah.
So, like PySpark has a lot, right? You can give a schema and that's like,
Yeah, exactly.
You say, you want to know, I don't give any schema and it versus it, and then it breaks it at 2045 row because it's a none that you expect. Like, how far do you want to go to have a typeset ingress so that you know that downstream there's no problem? Like, that's quite, that's a tightrope, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's part of the reason we are open source and we like this extensibility idea. We're like, I think that the raison d'etre of a platform, like its reason to exist, is it takes away 95 of your problems out of 100, and the other 5 you can actually customize so that you can fix this. Right? Like, there's nothing preventing users of the platform of writing their own schemas and pulling out the data of the databases, but we expect like an average CRUD app database should actually be able to be within space.
So another question? Oh, what? A lot. I'll start in the back. Oh, there's more. You got a question, right? Or
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you deal with relationships, especially when they are not defined, or maybe you talk about NoSQL?
How do you deal with relationships that are not defined, especially you talk about NoSQL databases that if you go from a collection to another, you know how you detect them?
For NoSQL databases, currently we don't have an off-the-shelf system. If you have a suggestion, that does sound interesting, actually.
yeah, maybe the Trello connector is Trello schema is nice to show for Like, so when there is an explicit relationship, entity relationship in the application, that's something that we also just map in our pedantic model. But when it isn't there, like Rauf said, we don't support that yet. But if you have suggestions, feel free.
The database of the database, I guess.
You read from the definition schema of poggers or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you know, again with this, it's like detection of those relationships fully polymorphically. That might be pretty hard, but we don't restrict our users of actually finding those relations themselves and loading that data in that way. Right?
But if you have ideas, I'd love to talk afterwards. Yeah. I'm sorry, his hand was up. You have the mic already, I don't care.
So, as I understand this, you're essentially cloning data sources into a different data store so that it is more readily available for an AI agent to query, right? So, you know, in terms of use cases, a lot of databases the value of them is that they are fresh, right? They have fresh data. They know what the state of the data is. Like, if I'm talking to an agent and I want to know the status of my order that changed 2 minutes ago from whatever, delivered to not delivered, then I want to have a fresh set of information. So, and also databases can be really huge, right? We have these big database servers for a reason. So, in what way, when does it make sense to clone all this information, except if it's scraping web pages? Of course, that is a slow process, but if you're dealing with high performance, high refresh information, why not just talk to the database directly?
So you can. So first of all, it's not a one-shot clone. You can synchronize it in a scheduled way, and so first of all, you can just bring down you can bring up the frequency of how often you want to synchronize it. We are also going to move towards like event-based synchronization. So whenever a change occurs in a certain source, and
but like why would I want that thing in the middle when I can talk to the database directly and get new information into my AI? What is the holding power of why does it exist?
So the whole reason that vector databases and accompanying knowledge graphs exist is so that AI agents can easily grasp the context, at least to have a starting point of where they want to search for information, right? Usually what we see is this can be the sort of final destination for these things. You could imagine that you find some context in the vector database, then based on that you formulate what you're going to look for inside the actual source. And you know, if it's up to date, then actually what we see with the current users, that's pretty much all they need at the moment.
And why you would use something like that in the middle is because, or why you would use a service like this, at least that's what we're seeing with the first couple of customers, is building and managing a service like this, especially for the smaller companies that we're working with. It's crucial for their functioning, but it's not their distinguishing competency to build and manage this. So it makes sense to outsource this to a specific service like ours that's specialized in doing that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think an even better answer to the question is that, as far as I know, the agents who work.
Maybe an even better answer to the question is that the agents I've heard of are not able to search through all these apps efficiently. That's the answer to this question, right?
That's one of them, yeah. Also,
sure.
yeah. Because we also, or actually that's what Rauf mentioned, that the whole reason for existence for these parallel vector and graph databases or these knowledge bases is to make that obscure and hard to retrieve data on third-party applications retrievable or accessible for agents. So yeah. Questions?
Follow up to these two questions is so a big advantage of this would be that you can also stitch together a pipeline of agents that talk to each other, and that is not something that would be possible with like a direct connection to the database, right?
Mm-hmm. Or at least I don't know if I fully understand your question.
Not necessarily. So that's not what we
That's not your aim.
No, that's not our problem. So what Airweave is really good at is aggregating this information in a form where, context retrieval, kind of the whole fundamental of how you do RAG, how you filter on results on RAG. That's sort of where we currently stop as a framework. How you then use that for multi-agent collaboration, that's kind of open-ended, but it's not something that we necessarily offer.
Yeah, the core service really comes down to serving the information in the optimal place for retrieval for downstream agentic use cases, and if that would be some multi-agent collaboration, then that's up to the developer. We just make it as easy as possible to find that information on, let's say, your Salesforce or Trello or whatever.
Okay. So in that case, like the problem is keeping it synchronized, like.
Keeping synchronized, managing user credentials, that's also something that comes out of the box with Airweave. So it's also fully tailored. I don't want to make this a pitch too much, but that's like one of the reasons you would use it, because we automate all of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Last question. So you spoke about the ingest, right? The pipeline. What about if you want to connect customized outputs or sinks? Right, so you talked about the tap end of it, but what about the sinks? Can you write a custom sink into your own knowledge base or whatever?
Yeah. So, you want to go?
Yeah, I don't think I understand the question.
So you mean, to what extent?
So like you show that you take the data in and you stuff it into VB8 or the vector store that you have. But what if I want to push it somewhere else? Like I have my own RAG pipeline. I want to create maybe different types of vectors. I want to do some other things.
Then
Yes. So we offer essentially 4 types of connectors that you can extend. One is the source, the one that we just showed you. I would say that's the simplest one. Destinations is one. A third one is embedding models. You might have a very specific way of embedding stuff. If you are in a very specific jargon of a specific field of expertise, embedding models, or you want to do image embedding alongside, then we offer that open-endedness. And then the fourth one that we're actually working on is transformer nodes that you can actually write and then put inside of your.
Yes. So, for example, if you want to deduplicate or things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's all these entities that are being created, but you might have, let's say you are integrating from multiple sources that all have email, but there's only one type of email type that you are actually willing to track for whatever reason on your destination, right? Then we offer ways of, so this is still in development, but we offer ways to essentially click on this plus icon and add your transformer so that you finally put it in a way that is as palatable as possible for your agent to consume the data.